BasuandGodin Notebook. 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 Hey everybody! Welcome to another edition of the Basu and Godin Notebook. I'm Marc-Antoine Godin. This is Arpin Basu. Hello, Arpin. How you doing today?
Hello. Good. Doing well. Excited. Today's an exciting episode. So I'm excited.
It is an exciting episode because we've got a guest, none other than General Manager Kent Hughes is with us on the show. Well, full disclosure, it's an interview that we recorded 2 days ago, so on Wednesday. But I mean, 48 hours after, it's still extremely relevant because it's a window into his mindset, the way that the general manager is thinking, is approaching things too. It's also a lighthearted conversation. I like that. Kent is able to get that tone with us, and I don't know, it was fun.
Yeah, so let's just get to it. Okay, here's Canadiens General Manager Kent Hughes talking about the rebuild and some of his philosophies behind building this team.
All right, so we're very pleased to be joined today by Canadiens General Manager Kent Hughes. Kent, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're recording this on Wednesday, January 21st, and our spies are telling us that it's your birthday today. So happy birthday.
Yes. Yeah. Had the best birthday gift ever. I woke up this morning and speaking to my wife, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm 3 years from 60. She said, well, the good news is you're 4.
Oh, yes. Turn back the clock. So what do we wish you for the upcoming year?
What are we wishing for? Can I be so bland as to say progress?
I mean, if you choose to be bland, sure. I mean, this is going to be a great interview if that's the tact you're taking.
I'll come back to you on that.
All right. Sure.
Well, if that's what you promise your wife too, she'll roll her eyes and say, "Progress, really, Ken?" Okay.
We haven't made a lot of progress in 30 years. She might be happy with that.
Oh, jeez.
If it's personal progress on my part,
I can't wait for her to hear that. So you share a birthday with Kirby. Actually, I didn't know that. So that's a common thing you guys have. But Ken, I want to start this conversation. I want to talk about the gerbil. Okay. Your gerbil that doesn't stop running and you stay up at night. When you mentioned that, how do we, essentially what you just said, progress out of a rebuild phase, transitioning into a competitive phase? I'm curious to know, what are some of the thoughts that go through your mind? To what extent have you looked at other rebuilding projects and sort of tried to pick their brains a little bit, or pick what they did to see what not to do, what to do, and just how do you feel this transition in an ideal world would happen?
Well, in Arpin, I think you and I have had this conversation. Probably one of the trickiest components of a rebuild is just the timing of it, right? The window, when you enter your window, how do you mirror the growth of your young talent with the window of competitiveness or prime of your, kind of existing group of veteran hockey players too. So the one thing that strikes me when we look at the teams that have had successful rebuilds, and quite frankly, just look at the National Hockey League and teams that have been successful in general, I really believe they have an identity. I remember as an agent often thinking, we'd come out of whoever won the cup and everybody would be trying to change how they did their team because they had to emulate the New Jersey Devils, or they had to emulate the next group of teams. And then Pittsburgh's winning and you had to have enough speed, and then Colorado and Tampa are winning and you had to have enough skill, and then Florida's winning and you have to be hard enough. I think if you chase what the team is currently doing in terms of how they go about winning, you're going to constantly reinvent your team, and I think you spin your wheels, or in my case, the gerbil does. So the largest challenge for us is, I think we're starting to get a feel based on how our team plays and the kind of players that we have, the kind of hockey we're going to have to play to win, to be successful. We have enough pieces at this point in time that tell us the not every one of those players has to have the same look, notwithstanding how we're going to play. And that challenge is really going to be, we've got a lot more, we have more skill coming. The Hages, the Zorowskis of the world, the Pickfords of the world are just obviously names that are more discussed, certainly in the media or social media. So we know those players are out there. They will give us more skill. But at some point in time, around the edges, how do we improve the physicality? How do we improve the competitiveness of our team? I hear a lot of talk about size. And how much bigger or tougher Washington was than us last year in the playoffs. We had big players. Joel Armia's 6'4", Kirby's 6'4", Andy's 6'4". There's a lot of larger hockey players on the team. To me, it really just comes down to, you can be 6'4", or you can be 6 foot. It's the competitiveness of it. And that to me, and I've had conversations with Marty and said, if as a hockey player you were a 9.5 out of 10 on competitiveness, how many players do we have that match that competitiveness, and how many are an 8.5 to your 9.5 and so on? So I think it's for us, it's going to be to identify, the one or two, three elements we feel we really need to improve on. And then how do we go about acquiring those elements to round out the team? Because truthfully, in a utopia, we probably have 9 different things we'd love to do to build the perfect team, but I don't think anybody ever builds a perfect team.
Have you identified those 2 or 3 things so far that you think that you need the most improvement on?
Yeah, yes and no. I think we have ideas about what we would like to do, and how we go about doing it, or answering some of those things. That's where the gerbil keeps me up at night still, right? Trying to figure it out. Otherwise, I guess our plan would be complete, subject to putting it in action or executing it.
Can you just distinguish between physicality and competitiveness? Because I don't know if they're necessarily the same thing. Are they the same thing? And I understand the distinction with size, but I think someone would look at Laine and say he's highly competitive. He's not a physical player, right? And so it's like, when you say competitiveness, like, how do you
when I say competitiveness, I'm referring to exactly to what Laine is, right? What Galley is. Neither of them, are start with a 6, right? They're both in the 5 foot and change. So that type of player wins puck battle. You go in a corner and you come out with a puck, and can you have a team full of guys that are sub 6 foot and really competitive? No. That's what, like I said, there's no, you're trying to build your team. But I think one of the things we would like to see more of and coax out of our team and the current players as well is, can we ratchet up that competitiveness 1 or 2 levels?
But as it currently stands, where do you think that your team is when it comes to playing against heavier teams? And would it sustain, your brand of hockey would sustain facing a heavier opponent in a 7-game series in the playoffs?
Can our brand of hockey sustain it? Of course. Do we have we're going to learn more and more about our team, right? But how much more pushback do we have 12 months later if we're able to continue to remain in a playoff position and we get into the playoffs? Because we can all say Washington did whatever they did to us, but they went to play a team that I suspect, although I haven't checked, is smaller and lighter than us in Carolina, and they got bounced in 6 games, who then got bounced in 5 games by Florida. So teams match up differently against different teams, but I wouldn't look at Carolina and think that they're a bigger team than we are. Right? They have a real identity as to how they play, and our identity is evolving. But no matter how you play the game, if you have a group that is highly competitive and has, can we say in a podcast, has a little bit of fuck you in them?
Sure.
Then that goes a long way to supporting whatever style of play you opt for.
Right.
So I want to pick up on something you said in the first answer that I think is critically important. Everyone always, I totally agree with you that everyone's like, oh, Florida won this way, we should build a team like that so that we can win that way. So we've had 2 coaches recently, John Hines yesterday, and I think it was John Cooper who said it. No, it might have been Todd McClellan. Anyhow, we've had 2 coaches
Todd
recently
McClellan.
it was Todd McClellan who called your brand of hockey unique. The way that you attack the game, I think it was actually Cooper. The way that you play the game is unique and it's different, and it requires an adjustment on their part to game plan for you. So how important is it to actually stick to your brand and stick to what you believe in is a winning brand of hockey, regardless of what teams are doing around you and regardless of what has success in this copycat league thing that we always hear about? How opposed are you to that?
I wouldn't want to become a copycat team. That doesn't mean that you don't borrow from what others do. But do I envision the Montreal Canadiens becoming a clone of the Florida Panthers? No. I think if we were to do that, we would set ourselves back a lot of years trying to build that type of team. And quite frankly, when you have a certain group of hockey players, it may force you down a certain path, right? Especially, I mean, we're going through a rebuild, so we did have some core pieces, but we didn't have 20 core pieces. But if you were to just come in and take over another team that wasn't in the process of a rebuild, you may have to, if you believe hockey has to be played a certain way, that could be pretty tricky to come in and try to manage a team or build a team or reshape a team when you don't share, you don't have the players that fit your version of how to play the game. I just think that is the equivalent of a rebuild to me.
Kent, we haven't had the chance to speak to you since the Alexandre Texier signing. So I know that a lot of fans are wondering why now. They wonder about the timing of it. So can you enlighten us in terms of why you chose to do it now? And also, is it me or the talk about a Swiss Army knife type of player seems to be something that's more and more valued and popular around the league. And when you identify a player like that, it's important to snatch him and make sure that he can play a variety of roles for you.
Yeah, certainly one of the things that is interesting or appealing to us in Texas game is the fact that he has the versatility. Like when he first came up, what he watched, I guess, against Utah, played his first game, I believe, against Vegas. I think at the time he played with Andy and Jake Evans. I think that was the line. Whatever the line was, it was a not a top 6 role, and he helped that line for a period of whatever number of games it was. You see his versatility, that he's able to do what he does irrespective of who he plays with. The other piece that I feel we probably are a little bit short on, or that he certainly brings in terms of quality, is he's pretty effective at protecting pucks in the offensive zone. Yes. He's one of the players, I would have him as a top 3 or 4 player among our forward group at being able to have a player on his back and still make a play. Irrespective of how big or strong you are, there's a lot of components that go into that, right? How much balance you have to be able to absorb players and still come out and make plays out of it. And that's probably something we could use more of. I also think like within a game, we seem to go through sequences where we're trying to survive here. Like we got to through. I'm think of the Dallas game where they were starting to push, and there was probably 2 or 3 minutes where they were in our zone the whole time, and we go back into the offensive zone. Sometimes we don't need a quick strike because if it doesn't happen, they're going right back again. You just need to be able to come up for air and breathe, and having guys that can extend a shift in the offensive zone is important. It's going to help us manage flows within a game, which I think is something we're still working on. So the versatility was important. I think from a business side of things, he's an ARB eligible player. When you deal with ARB, it's its own unique marketplace. I feel like it's like a distortion within the market because arbitration, some guys make less than they would make in the open market and some guys make more. And if an ARB case doesn't equate with what you see the player's value to your team to be, if you see the ARB case is above the value you see a player's, then you're compelled to not qualify that player because there ultimately ends up being pressure on that player to protect the marketplace as a whole for other players and other teams. So ultimately, the other thing we always look at, and this isn't to say that any player we sign, we plan to trade, but I think with the unknowns, when you sign a player to a contract, you're always hoping that contract is tradable at some point in time. I know Lou Lamoriello often said, if you have time, use it.
Yeah.
While I agree with that, I think we have, in a lot of cases, acted early with extensions. Laine's a year early. Gooley was a year early. Slav was a year early. So I think it's a combination of all those factors, both marketplace and versatility that he brings to our group.
Got it.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. I also want to pick up on something you said earlier too, because I think it's vital in what you're doing, and this is probably the hardest part of your job. And if I were you, this is what would keep me up at night: is marrying the different windows in your organization. You got like the Suzuki, Cole, Gooley, kind of that age group. You got Slav, Demi, Demidov, Hudson, sort of growing into their prime years, I guess now, and then you have this undercurrent of talent coming that you mentioned many, many times the last time you spoke to us at midseason. In there is David Reinbacher, and I'm just wondering the extent to which, obviously, his development has been stunted at times because of injury through no fault of his own. At this point, watching him and evaluating him, where do you see him fitting in these variety of windows that you're trying to marry and bring together all at once?
Well, he's obviously, as you pointed out, he's been stunted by injury along with, other players in our team. I mean, obviously Kirby coming back is certainly one who he's probably the poster boy for injuries stalling his development. I would say in David's case, we have the luxury of ensuring that he's overripe before we recall him. I think given all the noise that was around David because we didn't draft Mishkov and the added pressure that it put on him, I think that's probably the prudent course of action, is to make sure that he's most ready for NHL action when he comes up. I think in the past, in a rebuild, we threw guys to the fire a little bit and let them learn as they go. But we could also afford more mistakes back then. And I think I had said, people were saying we viewed development differently. And while I think that's true in some regards, I also pointed out that some of it is just a product of the circumstances that we're in, and that if we were Florida, Vegas, or Colorado, we probably wouldn't let guys make mistakes as often and throw them back out there. We just happened to be in a point in time in our process where we could afford that. And as we move through this process, that tolerance for mistakes will shift. I think Marty's a pretty tolerant coach, and the staff as a whole is or are. But nevertheless, the situation of where we are will ultimately affect that.
But are you happy with what you see from Reinbacher these days?
Yeah, by and large, I think there's a consistency component to it. But that, again, we're talking about a young guy who's come over here and he's never played an 82 game schedule. We would love to say he's got 100 and something games of pro experience in North America under his belt right now, but he doesn't. But the one thing I say all the time is good hockey players don't forget how to play hockey. It's like, how do we, and you see so many situations where somebody was good somewhere else and they come into a new environment and there's an adjustment. Like Bolduc is going through an adjustment here. I'm not worried that he forgot how to play hockey or forgot how to score goals. He's going through an adjustment. A player like Texier, who was struggling to find a role in St. Louis, comes here, and it just seemed like a more natural transition for him, a natural fit for how he plays. Ultimately, David's a really smart puck-moving defenseman. I think he's a really nice fit for how we play the game. He's grown. He's got size to him. He's a lot bigger than when we drafted him. And we're going to be patient. With all of these guys. I think you and I spoke, Arpin, at one point. I remember driving through the mountains of Vermont, and you were like, "Are you thinking there could be 2 windows?"
Yeah.
And I don't have the answer to that, right? Because there's a lot of unknowns that lie ahead of us, and we have another really good draft and find another couple of really important pieces. Yeah, there could be.
Well, especially if you open one earlier than you anticipated, right? I mean, that would be the circumstance for that, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's part of, as we talk about. I don't worry about. I have a lot of people ask me, like, you're in Montreal, and if you have, like, if this team wins a round or 2 in the playoffs, then everybody here is going to expect that you're right in the window and you need to go and make these trades. That doesn't keep me up at night. I think we came here, we have when we feel we're in our window to truly compete with the Colorados of the world, then that is the point in time that we need to trade in the future for the now. But I don't think the outside pressure will influence us in any significant way.
Well, it's funny you say that because you keep saying, I hear people say, and then you don't.
Well, you can't hide in this market.
I know.
You just gotta walk home and get offered advice or grab a beer and get. I was out for a year ago out at a local establishment, and these guys had come. I can't remember where. Like, they were from far away, but they were big Habs fans, and they came, said hi, and whatever. And they said, "Well, we won't bother you." And then they left, and the guy handed me a napkin, and it had like 10 things we needed to do.
Not gonna bother you.
Funny. Yes, I know exactly the establishment you're talking about, but we won't broadcast that. That's okay.
Your time is limited, but I wanted to ask you, because you referred to, eventually maybe moving some future for the now, and you're alluding to identifying the proper priorities to get better. But can you paint the picture, at least maybe financially? My understanding is that if you were to make some deals at the deadline or prior to the deadline, you're in a money in, money out sort of situation. So how does what sort of challenges does that present to you when maybe you want to trade quantity for quality, or you have certain big contracts on your roster right now? So this money in, money out situation, how does it apply to you these days?
Same way it applies to every other team who's in, money out situations. It's you figure out a way to make it work. I don't have, and if I did, I wouldn't sit here and be able to discuss it anyways. But I'm confident that if there was a right deal to be done, we could. I'm less worried about the money in, money out than I would be what's coming to us and what are we giving up to get it.
Okay.
And so just in that spectrum that you just mentioned, like when it's time to contend, then we'll do future for present. Everyone recognizes that you're not in that time now. How would you qualify your level of urgency to help this team right now? Not irregardless, but relative to how you would look at it if you were in a contention window or anything. Like how would you, if you had to pick a word to qualify your approach to the deadline, what would it be?
Prudent.
I was going to guess
cautious. Is that as bland as progress?
Yes. No, it's a great bookend to this interview. Actually, you started with a bland answer, and you're going to end with.
Arpin, you did tell me I need to learn to say less, so I'm working on it.
I believe that's someone else. I believe that's someone else who told you that you need to learn to say less. I don't think that was me.
I told him, depending on your. Actually, I don't even go there. It's not. No. I'll let that go.
You're on a live mic, Ken. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, so prudent is is your approach.
I mean, having said that, 2 years in a row, we did make trades. I mean, we can say we didn't trade players away for futures at the end of the year. But we did bring in Carrier, right, where we traded a younger D, and we brought in a Danault and traded what's a pretty good draft pick. We gave up what's going to be a second round pick, and at the time, a team that was at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. So, are we willing to do more? We're willing to do a lot of things, especially if it's a hockey trade. Right. Where we bring a player in that we think makes us a better hockey team, even with whatever would be going out against that player, if that player also could grow with us. Right. Yeah. If you're bringing somebody in that's in their mid to late 30s, you're not looking at that player growing with you. You're looking at that player just based on data regressing due to age
and filling a need right now and not for the future.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it was nice having you on the podcast, Ken. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Hope you have a great birthday, Ken.
Thank you. I don't know what my birthday wish is. I was too busy answering questions.
Progress. Your birthday wish was progress. That's what the headline of this interview is. How about
a playoff spot? How about a playoff spot?
Go, Ken. Like there you go. That's like good. That. You ended it on a high note, Ken. Well done. All right. Thanks so much, man.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
So that was interesting. Had a lot to say. I think some clarity came out on how the Canadiens are viewing this season. Progress, prudent, being the two buzzwords. Yes. But one thing. So I will take the blame for this. Okay. So when we were about to talk to Ken Hughes, Marc-Antoine was like, "Oh, we should ask him about Patrick Laine." I was like, what's he going to be able to say? Whatever. And so. But in retrospect, I was wrong. We should have asked him about Patrick Laine. We did not talk about Patrick Laine, and we should have got him on the record on Patrick Laine. So that is my bad. But it's worth talking about right now because Patrick Laine has seemed to be for quite some time verging on a return. A bit ahead of schedule. Like he was actually pretty much on the earlier end of his timeline that they gave out. And so. And this is relevant to the fact that Kirby Dach has come back for a couple of games, has had an audition on that first line, while Alex Texier has been injured, which avoided it also comes at a time when the bottom six has strung together a couple of really good games, the way it's currently constituted. The Danault Gallagher-Anderson line looked really rough in Ottawa. Looked really rough prior to that, but the last couple of games has looked really good. The Evans, Veleno, and Bolduc line has looked very good. Bolduc obviously got a few shifts with the top line last night against Buffalo. And then in all this, there's Patrick Laine. There's the return of Alex Texier from injury, which it should be any day now. There's Kirby Dach playing himself back into form. And there's just the general makeup of the lineup and where Patrick Laine fits in it and how they're going to shape the roster around it. There's all sorts of questions related to, which we could have asked the general manager since we just had him on the show, and I decided not to. So we could talk about it without him.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, had we had more time with Kent, because we took the time that was allocated to us, I think that it would have come up in the discussion, because it is an issue right now. Patrick Laine, I mean, it's been gradually observable since last season that in terms of playing style, in terms of chemistry, he's a hard fit at 5-on-5. We know what he can do on the power play. 5-on-5s, it's another story. And now you're starting to get a bit of balance in the lineup. You mentioned the successes that the bottom six seems to having, or some sort of cohesion that's going on. But there's many wrinkles to it because so let alone Alex Newhook, who's still injured. If you want to, at some point, and I feel as though the Canadiens seem to be punting the ball a little bit when it comes to Laine's return, but at some point you'll have to take him off IR. And when you do, you'll need to subtract one guy from the 23-man roster. So that's the first guy that you are going to basically scratch from your lineup or from your roster. Then you mentioned Texier. Texier is going to go back in at the expense of someone else, and then you haven't even put Laine back in the lineup. So inserting Laine there, it's a third guy that you have to scratch. Now, when we talked with Kent, you know, he mentioned how Gallagher is someone who is driving the team's competitiveness, and it was a constant theme throughout our conversation. He would always come back to the competitiveness of the team and how he wants to raise it. So despite the fact that he's slowed down, despite the fact that he's not the most productive player anymore on this team, what he inspires and the type of drive that he has is still very much valued by this team. You listen to Martin Saint-Louis talk about Zachary Bolduc. Obviously, Bolduc against Buffalo on Thursday night played one of his best games of the year. If he plays like that every game, he has nothing to worry about. He's going to stay in the lineup. There's no doubt about it. But the coach is really behind Bolduc. So you wonder, there's no easy scratch right now to make a place for Laine. And even if you do, he still remains like a square peg in a round hole. So I don't know how they're going to proceed with that. And that's not to mention the possibility of trying to trade him and his contract. You won't be able to trade him at the entirety of his contract. Even at 50%, I'm not sure they would be able to do it. So it's really a complicating situation for Kent Hughes and the Canadiens right now.
Yeah, it is. And the one thing that I kind of stick to with this is that we all have an idea of Patrick Laine in our minds, the version that we saw last season, the version that we saw for a few games at the beginning of this season. And it's clear, even him at the best version of himself, that there is no easy fit for him. However, having said that, there is a revolving door of holes on the right side of the top line. A lot of people have gotten a shot there. The latest being Bolduc for a few shifts last night, but obviously Dach started the game in that spot, and that's a tough ask for Kirby Dach after missing 2 months. To play on that line is a difficult responsibility because you're facing the other team's top players. Last night it was a steady dose of Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch, and that's every night. Every night you're playing the best players in the league. Basically, you're facing the other team's top line. When you've missed 2 months, that's a tough assignment. When you've missed 3 months, as Laine has, and played very little hockey over the last however many months that he's been with the organization, that's going to be even a tougher ask for him, because that's also not, Kirby Dach has the feet to be able to sort of maintain a certain pace of play, and Patrick Laine doesn't. It's just not a strength of his. So you're not touching the Kapanen line. That would be crazy. And so then you start looking at him in a bottom six role, which means heavy defensive zone starts. Like there's no clear, deployment safe zone to put him back in the lineup, And then the other issue is for Martin St. Louis is, he really likes Joe Veleno. Joe Veleno does everything that's asked of him, and he appreciates having another lefty faceoff guy, a guy who's physical, a guy who's fast, doesn't produce much offensively, but does everything else that's asked of him. And so that's a tough guy for a coach to sit. Having said all of that, I think it would be in the Canadiens' best interest to give Laine a legitimate opportunity to make an impression here, because I think this is a situation where if they try to if they don't do that, I think that's something that other players would not look at as being the right thing to do, and don't forget, like, this guy spent his whole summer in Montreal. No one forced him to do that. He did that of his own volition. Worked very hard, was on the ice in Brossard every day. Really wanted to make this season his real comeback story season, where he really becomes the best version of himself again. It's hard to see a path to him doing that on this team, the way it plays, the level to which speed and anticipation and puck management and all these things that are such key tenets to the way the Canadiens play are all things that are not strengths of Patrick Laine, right? I mean, he's a world-class elite shooter, has other good offensive skills that go kind of under the radar, but he's a pretty good playmaker when he's on top of things, but that good playmaking will often lead to bad puck decisions and bad risks with the puck and turnovers. But there are qualities there that could, in theory, help Suzuki and Caulfield eventually, even if the matchups would be less than ideal. But I guess what I'm getting at is they need to give him an opportunity to play himself out of the lineup, essentially. Like, not the opportunity to play himself out of the lineup, but that if they choose to put him in a lesser role or not play him at all, they need to at least give him a chance to earn his way into the lineup, is the way I should have said it. Because I don't think a lot of players around the league would look at them kind of, sort of blocking him out right off the bat without giving him an opportunity. I don't know how well people would look at that. And I'm talking about other players, obviously. Like, it's just not an easy situation for them to handle. But I think he deserves that chance.
But there's also the fact that, yes, I understand that the status that he's got and how it would be perceived by his teammates. But there's also guys who've been there, who've been healthy, and who have done everything that was asked of them, and who are not deserving to be scratched for anybody at this point, or certainly not for Laine. You mentioned Veleno, who's in the coach's good books. I think, of course, Laine's got a much higher profile than Veleno. But if I'm a Veleno teammate, I would say that really sucks, because what has he done to be scratched, But I'll mention something, though, because you said the minute that you go on the bottom six, you get a heavy dose of defensive shifts. That is true for the Evans line. But right now, part of what makes the Dano line successful is that they are not getting defensive shifts. And the reason why it seems to be working for Gallagher right now it's because he gets a lot of offensive zone faceoffs, and Danault wins those faceoffs. So once the Canadiens start possession in the offensive zone, and you've got a Gallagher who's fresh and starting his shift there, he can still be very effective. You look at the game against the Wild on Tuesday. Like, I'll take Danault out of the equation because he's got some Fogo situations or like helping out for a face-off guy, but
face-off get off. Yes,
right. That's the Fogo face-off get off. Yeah, but let's say his line mates, Anderson and Gallagher, had 6 at 5-on-5. They had 6 offensive zone face-offs. They had 2 neutral zone face-offs and 0 defensive zone face-offs. Against Buffalo, they had 5 in the offensive zone, 0 in the neutral zone, and 1 in the defensive zone. Maybe an icing, I don't know, I haven't checked. But it's heavily skewed towards starting in the offensive zone, and I suspect that it's primarily designed to give a chance to Gallagher to maximize his effectiveness, and it's working. So why wouldn't you double down and say, if you want to start Laine on the bottom 6, well, maybe that you could do Laine, Danault, Gallagher, and keep that strategy going. And because that you could have then Anderson with Veleno and Bolduc on the 4th line, and it would still, it would be a great 4th line, actually. So I don't know. I'm just saying that maybe it would be too much of one strategy that would be convenient both for Laine and Gallagher. But it seems to me like if I play along with your idea and with your scenario, that might be a way to look at it.
Well, yeah, I hadn't. Actually, that's a good catch by you. I hadn't, because Danault takes so many defensive zone draws. I hadn't noticed that Gallagher and Anderson aren't on the ice with him when he does. That they are face-off, get-off situations. So that's a good catch and a good point. And so, yeah, that could be a way to integrate him into the lineup. I mean, I guess the point is that they seem to be behaving like it's not imminent, and everything we see on the ice makes it feel like it is imminent. And so something's going to have to give there. I don't know what they're going to be able to do. We mentioned his wife's weird Instagram post. I mean, that's a thing that she did purposefully, and so a lot of people took notice of that. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens, but it's a very delicate, touchy kind of situation. And good on Gallagher, honestly, like after that game Saturday in Ottawa, like I really thought he was on his way out of the lineup. He didn't play for the final 7.5 minutes in Ottawa, like not a single shift. And we were talking to him on Friday in Ottawa after practice, and he sort of, all the questions about the lineup crunch, he kind of took upon himself and sort of assumed that, well, I think rightfully assumed that he's part of that conversation of who is going to come out. He was a candidate for it, and he knew it. And he's played really well since then. I mean, since that game in Ottawa, it's only been 2 games, but he's played well. So that's a credit to him, and we shouldn't be surprised. Like this, I think we were mentioning on the show at one point, the last time we looked at Gallagher and said, this is tough to watch. And he looks like he's behind. He usually finds a way to make himself relevant again and again, with Ken Hughes mentioning, I mean, I think he mentioned Gallagher because he's less than 6 feet, and it was a conversation about size versus competitiveness. So his 2 examples were Hudson and Gallagher, 2 of his most competitive guys, and that's the type of competitiveness he wants. But it's like it's a different conversation when Newhook comes back, right? Because wherever you put Newhook in the lineup, the team gets better. No matter who he's replacing, the guy he's better than the guy he's replacing, and there's no real debate about that. That's what makes the Laine thing tricky, is because you could debate, are the Canadiens better off with Patrick Laine or Joe Veleno in the lineup? It's a legitimate debate, based on the role and the amount of boxes each player checks for the way the Canadiens play. It's a legitimate debate. Now, I think I would lean towards them being better with Laine in the lineup, frankly, but it's that's assuming that there is a marked difference in the way Laine moves on the ice. And I think that's a possibility. You remember like last year, he came back from a knee injury that everyone assumed was going to end his season. And it didn't. Ultimately, he got a second opinion that allowed him to avoid surgery and avoid ending his season, but he played on that knee all season. That might have been a factor in how he was unable to move at an NHL level over the latter half of that season, because when he first came back, it's, he's always going to be kind of slow and sort of stealthy the way he sort of navigates the ice like a shark almost. And, but as the season went along, that changed from stealthy to slow and being unable to keep up really. And I wonder if the state of his knee had anything to do with that. Which is why I'm just curious to see him. I'm just curious to see him play and see if he can help this team, and if that means that makes Marty's life more complicated, putting a lineup together every night for a little while, then so be it. And if Laine proves to be the bad fit that we all assume he is, then they can act in kind. But I think he deserves a chance to prove otherwise,
Right. Regarding Laine versus Veleno, I think it would have an impact on Nick Suzuki doing that, because if you take Veleno out of the lineup, then Suzuki becomes again a regular contributor on the PK, more frequent contributor on the PK than he is now. But if you add Laine, you would probably want to have your second unit of power play on the ice a little bit more. And then, if you have Doc, Kapanen, Dobson, Laine on that second unit, it's an attractive second unit. That's what we've been saying all along, that with everybody healthy, especially Laine, he's quite a weapon there on that PP2. So maybe that what Suzuki might have to give more on the PK, he wouldn't have to give as much on the power play. I don't know. That's one thing. The other is that when you mention his speed, I kind of I'm not too worried that he'd be back, and I think that Patrick Laine can skate all right. He's not necessarily a slow player with his legs. I think it's just the way that he processes the game. Alex Kovalev used to slow the game down a lot, but he was able to skate when need be. Even Evgeny Malkin slows the game down. Laine, he puts it into another level, but he's that sort of player that slows the game down. It's just that the Canadiens are not playing that way. When they're always talking about pace, well, having a guy who holds things constantly and waits, and I think that your description or your comparison to a shark is really adept here. I think that it used to work, and it might still work on some teams, but it's just that I don't see the Canadiens playing that way anymore. So to me, it's more a question of way of playing and processing the game more than the health of the knee or the strength or the skating stride that would enable him to get from point A to B at decent speed. I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, I just think that there's a will in him right now, and so he's a highly motivated player. But it's just, we'll see what happens. It's going to be tricky, and for sure. But I just I think if the way I would look at it if I were the Canadiens is like, what if this guy is so desperate to continue his NHL career? Because remember, there was a time very recently when he was considering retiring altogether. He was in a bad place mentally. He had a lot of things to address in his personal life and for his mental health, and it was a tough journey. But he fought through it, and he battled to get back to the NHL and found the joy in playing hockey back again in Montreal. And that was his one goal last year, was to enjoy hockey again. And he enjoyed it to such an extent. He spent the whole summer here. Like, it's really, it's what if a different version of Patrick Laine emerges? And I think when you're looking at it from the Canadiens' point of view, that's the way I would look at it. Like, this guy could potentially be a game changer. Like, you're adding like an elite goal scorer
for sure
to your lineup. And so I just think it would be whatever. I don't know, obviously we didn't ask Ken Hughes about it, but I don't know if he could have given like a totally honest answer in any case, but it's whatever the Canadiens might think of him. I would view him in that light. Like, this guy might take our team to another level to some extent, or just add a weapon to our lineup if it works. And if it doesn't, then so be it, but whatever. Let's see if it can work. That's, I guess, my only point, and not judge him based on what we saw towards the end of last season or the second half of last season. It's not. And when Ken Hughes said at the end of the season, we don't make the playoffs without Patrick Laine, like, he's not entirely wrong. A lot of people were like, whoa, what are you talking about? Well, no, of course. Like, he scored in his first 4 games in a Canadiens uniform or something like that. Single-handedly fixed the power play at a time when the power play was not working at all. And really kind of turned the Canadian season. One of the many inflection points of last season, his arrival, Carrier's arrival, Dobesh arriving. There were all these little moments in the season that turned a bad season back towards a good season. And he was like the first one of those, and so it's these are all things that I think need to be kept in mind. And I think there needs to be an open mind whenever he's deemed healthy, with heavy emphasis on the word deemed. It should be looked at with an open mind. I think that's really, and it should be looked at through the prism of how do we treat our players? Are we being fair with all our players? And they need to be fair with Patrick Laine. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that a former agent would have that sensitivity. It's his calling card. Yes. You mentioned elite goal scorer. That's Patrick Laine's calling card. And they have, whether they want to move him or keep him, they have to work based on that, on that profile. When you talk about the fact that he was, contemplating retirement or looking at what's next in his career, I sort of draw a parallel with Jonathan Drouin here, who finished in Montreal a long-term deal, having not fulfilled the promises of the talent that he had, and he was looking at whatever would be offered to him. And the year after, he signed a league minimum deal for 1 year in Colorado, re-upped for another 1-year deal after that was a bit more lucrative. And now he's on a 2-year deal with the Islanders. But the days of Drouin becoming the next star and making sure that he's going to make good money on a long-term contract, those days he understood that they were gone. And I wonder if Laine, when his current contract ends, if he won't be faced with the same thing. So it's still, there's still time for him to prove that he can be that elite goal scorer. But the one thing that I will argue, though, in light of what we've seen from the Canadiens for the majority of the season, but especially also in January, it might not be an elite goal scorer they need as much as someone that can help them prevent some goals, because their defense remains the issue right now. They're giving up a lot of goals, and it's been so far just in 2026, so far in the month of January, there's the 6th teams in terms of goals given, goals against. They gave up 40 goals in 12 games for an average of 333. They've been saved by their offense, most likely all year. So if they want to make a push and make a run in the playoffs, I think that they'll need to tighten things up. So personally, I think that they would be wise to adjust their roster accordingly and trying to say, okay, well, we don't want to stop scoring goals, but we've got enough talent as it is. We trust our skill level, but what sort of lineup can we have that would best help us in reducing the number of chances we give up and the number of goals we give up?
I think that sounds like a key element of the Laine versus Veleno debate. It's just that, that's kind of it, right? It's how much goal scoring do you really need? It's
because Veleno, there's I don't know, it might be just a French culture, but you'll tell me, there used to be like a funny magazine in the 80s called Croc, all right? And they had a special sports special that was like around 1983 or something. And in those pages of that magazine, you had a full breakdown of all the Canadiens players and all the Quebec Nordiques players. And when it came to Doug Jarvis, it said he's a complete player. When he's on the ice, he prevents both teams from scoring.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Yeah,
yeah. So I feel as though with Veleno, he doesn't provide you much offense, but he doesn't give up much either defensively. So that's great,
Yeah, but I think he does provide. He provides offense in the sense that he does things that allow that line to play in the offensive zone.
True.
He extends offensive zone possession. He doesn't provide offense in the sense that he's rarely on the ice, let alone taking part in goals. I'd be curious to actually, well, forget it. I won't check it, but I can't imagine he's been on the ice for that many goals this season, let alone, obviously he hasn't scored many and he hasn't assisted on many, but he does. He's a good forechecker. He wins board battles. He's good through the neutral zone. He's good at tracking back. There's a lot of things he does well. So, it's a legitimate debate because of what the Canadiens need. And do you need? Because when you talk about preventing goals, the number one thing you could do to prevent goals is to play in the offensive zone. And I feel like Joe Veleno does things that allow his line to spend probably more time than they deserve in the offensive zone, just because he's able to do those things. So we'll see, because the other member of that line, who's been Zachary Bolduc of late, as we mentioned, just had like a great night on Thursday, and it's gonna. So I just a little aside on Zach Bolduc, I found it kind of funny. So after practice on Wednesday, actually right after we spoke to Kent on Wednesday, I rushed off to practice, right? And I get there and, it's a pretty decent room, but then one of the last guys to get off the ice was Bolduc, and I stuck around for a while and I chatted for him for a while because Marty, the day before, on Tuesday before the game against Minnesota, had talked about, he took a lot of questions on Bolduc, talked about his identity, said he's not looking for his identity. He just needs to play to it more often. And he knows what it is. Right. It's being fast and physical and shooting and all these things. And he basically gave a grocery list of things that Zach Bolduc has to do on a nightly basis. And I brought that grocery list to him on Wednesday, basically wanted to get his take on everything Marty was saying. And what Marty was saying was that he's doing the things off the puck that I'm asking him to do, and he's checking more boxes on a regular basis. He's not producing, but I'm very happy with where he's at, and sort of, kind of defended him. And I asked him how often he has to remind himself that Bolduc is only 22 and it's only his second NHL year. And even though he had a great end of season last year, he doesn't have this long track record of success. Like, he's still a work in progress. Right. And Marty fully said, I'm fully cognizant of that. And it's an adjustment, and we're going to have to be patient with it. When I brought this to Bolduc on Wednesday, it's amazing. This is how players' minds work, right? I told him what Marty said and how he's happy with his play off the puck and defensively and all these things. And he's like, yeah, I'm happy with my defensive game too, but I still have more to bring offensively. Like, I really need to bring more offensively, and I'm really hoping to do that. And I was like, you can't turn it off, eh? I was like, you can't turn it off. It's just when you're an offensive player, and this guy was like rookie of the year in the Q. He scored 60 goals. He's first round pick. Like, he's always been defined by his ability to put pucks in nets. And I'm like, and then I was like, it's you can't turn that side of you can't be turned off, right? And he's like, no, it can't. Like this is what I'm about. I will, he didn't quite go that far, but basically saying like, this is what I need to validate myself in the NHL. Like this is what I need to satisfy my own standards of how I am as a hockey player. And so if I have to do all those other things to ultimately wind up with goals, I'm happy I'm doing those things, but I want some goals. Like it's like, and he still hasn't scored a goal in 2026. He got his second assist of the month last night. But how he got that assist, I think, was very telling. Like he had his zone entry that kind of went. It was the first shift he got with Suzuki and Caulfield. So Marty comes off looking great, right? He decides to put him out there midway through the second period. The zone entry doesn't work. It gets turned over. He curls back and puts himself in a spot right where the Sabres are trying to clear the zone, catches it, puts it down, gets a scoring chance. Suzuki buries the rebound. Like that play, and we've talked about it before, like that play demonstrated a certain level of IQ that we were not seeing from Bolduc on a consistent basis. And maybe we're still not seeing. He had one good night. Like, let's see him put together three. Well, that's not fair. He's had, I would say, since at least the games that Evans has played with him, he's looked good. Yeah. In every game that he's had Evans as a centerman, he's looked good. And so let's see if he can repeat that, because I said it on a recent episode. I don't remember when, but that long term, I still see him as a fit with Suzuki and Cole. I know a lot of people disagreed. I saw some disagreement in the chat on that, and they don't see it because it's hard to get out of what you're currently seeing right now. It's that applies to Laine. The last time we saw Laine, we remember what he looked like. We remember what we thought watching him, and we're like, "There's no way this guy." Like, but the passage of time is an important thing, and when you're 22, what's Bolduc going to look like when he's 24? Like, he has every tool in him to complete that line at 24, and so
but you just can't give him that job now based on the fact that he's going to be able to do it later.
No, of course not. Just to earn it.
There used to be a point in the rebuild where you could have done that. They're not at that point anymore. But for sure, he's got the tools for that. That's why they acquired him. They both, Kent and Gortz, they both see him as a guy who's got the tools to be a top six forward on this team. And I can see that. The way that he played against Buffalo, he's got all the elements for that. It's just putting it together and finding some consistency. And that's that word is like, that's the prime hurdle for a young player in the NHL, is figuring out on a consistent basis. So he's no different than many others.
But the exercise I would encourage people to do when thinking about Bolduc is be honest and go back to like November of 2023 and ask yourself what you were thinking about Slav and how you felt about Slavkovsky being in the lineup every night. Should he go to Laval? This, that, like, just remind yourself and picture yourself. And like, I was the same way. I remember we were in Arizona, and it was the whole league was talking about Uri Slavkovsky. Like, it was how the Canadiens were ruining Uri Slavkovsky. That was the ongoing narrative at the time. And I remember being in Arizona and just, talking to some of his teammates and how like they were all like kind of in crisis averting mode. Like, we weren't given access to Slavkovsky. Like, the Canadiens totally sheltered him. It was too much. It was too much. And from that point on, it's just been incremental gains. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 back, 2 forward, 1 back. And it's been consistently like that ever since that point, because the following game in St. Louis is the first time Slavkovsky played with Suzuki and Caulfield. He didn't stay there, but he scored a goal that night. Not with those two. He scored a goal on the second power play unit, but he scored a goal that night. And it changed. It's one of the inflection points in his career, are those few days. Bolduc hasn't had anything quite like that because the team is having success. But he's not lived up to the hype that he probably heard all summer. He spent all summer in the Quebec City area where he's from, and I'm sure he heard a lot of people talking about what a great trade this was for the Canadiens, how they fleeced the Blues, how they got this elite goal scoring talent, and he's going to change the makeup of this team, and he's going to be a top 6 forward, and this and that. He's going to score 30 goals, and he's going to be amazing. It hasn't quite worked out that way yet, but I think if you just remind yourself, whatever you think of Bolduc now, and whatever you thought of him like 2 weeks ago, let's say, and just think of what you thought of Slafkovsky at that time, and remind yourself that Bolduc's 22. At the end of my chat with Bolduc on Wednesday after practice, he's like, I feel like I haven't come out of my shell yet. I haven't shown the Canadiens what I can bring. I want to come out of my shelf. I want to show them. I want to show them the best version of myself. And at the end of that conversation, I turned to him and I said, "You remember you're 22, right?" And he looked at me, kind of laughed. He's like, "Yeah, I know, but it's like I know I can do more than this, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating that I'm not showing these guys who put faith in me and got me, that I'm not giving them the best version of myself. I want that so badly." And then next night, he goes out, and at the end of his dressing room avail, I said to him, "You remember you told me that you hadn't shown the best version of yourself?" I'm like, "Did you just show the best version?" He's like, "Cette version-là se ressemble beaucoup à meilleure version que j'ai." So that the version you saw tonight is a lot closer to the best version of myself. Yeah. So, I was happy for him, but that's the second time this season he sort of called himself out and then gone out and had a performance. Like earlier this season, he talked about how he wasn't being physical enough and he really needed to be physical. And then the next game, or the game that night, he went out and he had 5 hits in the first period. And then now he does this on Wednesday and talks about not showing the best version of himself, and then goes out and shows something that seemed to resemble at least the best version of himself, and a version that can really help this team. And so, but I think you're right to point out, and this was kind of the crux of my story last night, but you're right to point out that the fact that Bolduc's the Canadiens are in a different stage, so they can't just hand Bolduc a role that he's not ready for or hasn't earned, is 100% accurate. And I think his development and his improvement needs to be viewed through that lens. He's being asked to do things that others got to pass on,
What I find tricky is that we've come to see that Zachary Bolduc is most effective when he adds a physical aspect to his game. But I feel as though, because the game being so demanding, the style of play that Martin St. Louis asks is very demanding, the schedule is demanding, just the overall level of play. For a young player, physical play is probably one of the hardest aspects of hockey to bring in consistently. So it's a challenge for him. Scoring goals is one thing, play off the puck but if he involves himself physically, delivering hits and being also really annoying to the opponent, that's something that we see regularly. I mean, throughout the season, those little scrums or kerfuffles next to the benches as he finishes the shifts, and he gets entangled with an opponent. He seems to be, there's a bit of a shit disturber in him where he gets under the other guy's skin, But the physical aspect, it's going to take time to bring it like on a regular basis. Remember years ago, Josh Anderson said, "Yeah, I did." After playing a game where he dominated physically, he says, "I can't do it on 82 games. That's too much for me physically. It's too demanding to do that overnight. You do it in certain games, you bring it to the playoffs, but from game 1 to game 82, it's just not sustainable." But Bolduc wants to present the best version of himself, and I love his attitude, being hard on himself once in a while, calling himself out, challenging himself, and responding afterwards. It's all great. I'm just thinking that the physicality it doesn't come easily for any young player in the league, especially in today's environment. But his play off the puck, I mean, yes, his play on the Suzuki goal was very important, but there was a much more subdued play late in the second period, where his back check during an on-man rush by the Sabres shut down their attack there, and it was a key back check. And he's got on his line, not on his line, but on his team, Cole Caulfield, who is proving to everybody on the Canadiens that good defense, yes, will turn into good offense, because he's become a much more diverse offensive player since he's integrated, defensive notions to his play, and he's become a lot more well-rounded off the puck. It has helped his offensive game tremendously in the counterattack. So I think that as much as Bolduc is obsessed by bringing offense, he should just, if he sticks with good defense, it should translate into good offense, because he's got the best example possible on his team.
Oh, on it. Well, he has two actually, because on top of Caulfield, like, what's the one thing Marty said the most about Alex Newhook last year? He said that he's got great speed. He's got a great motor. If he can apply that speed on the other side of the puck, if he can apply that speed defensively, he'll take his game to the next level. And I actually brought that up with Bolduc on Wednesday, and because it's easy to turn on the afterburners when there's a loose puck and you have a breakaway going the other way. It's not as easy to do it in the situation that you described in the second period there. It's not as easy to do it on a back check or tracking back or trying to apply pressure in the neutral zone. It should be. It's just not. For a lot of hockey players, that's not the time that you open the throttle and you put it all, you floor it, But if Bolduc were to do that more often, he would create a lot of offensive opportunities for himself, and he would just be that much more difficult to face. After the game, you talk about him, being a shit disturber. He gets called for that penalty. He comes out of the box. Ivan Demidov, it's a hyper aware play to get him to send him the puck and get him, put him on a breakaway. And so he goes in on the breakaway. He doesn't score. Nice save by Luukkonen, whatever. And he's just standing in the crease, and he gets mobbed. And Rasmus Dahlin punches him in the face, and he winds up with a double minor. I didn't see the slash that he got called for.
Yeah, there was actually
happened.
The slash. Yeah, the slash. It's after he was separated from the scrum, and actually the slash was more penalty than his own roughing, because during that scrum,
there was no roughing.
No, he was just on the receiving end of him.
He was just standing there. So anyhow, so he's talking after the game, and he's got he's got a fat lip, and I'm like, is that Dahlin? He's like, yeah, part of the job. Ça fait partie du métier. It's like, but he's like, you know what? But it's an example of what I want to bring. Je vais dérangeant is the way he put it. I want to be annoying. I want to be, and so he was proud of the lip. He was just he was happy to have that fat lip. It showed that he was involved.
Well, may he bottle up this performance from last night and keep it with him, because that's the Zachary Bolduc the Canadiens need. And if he plays like that, goals will come. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. So just quickly before we go, just a quick thing. The Canadiens are headed to Boston today. They're playing the Bruins tomorrow. In the last 2 weeks, they've lost 4-0 to the Red Wings, 5-3 to the Sabres. They won 6-5 in Ottawa, a game they frankly should have lost, and lose 4-2 to the Sabres. So those are 4 divisional games against the 3 other teams that are trying to emerge out of this rebuilding phase and take over this division, and who are in the process of doing so, frankly. And so now the Canadiens are entering a perilous part of their schedule. You remember last year heading into Four Nations, the Canadiens hit a slide. So much so that Jeff Gorton and Ken Hughes were convinced that they were going to be sellers at the deadline, and it took Nick Suzuki coming out of that break, begging them to not touch their team, and then obviously Kent saying what he did, go win games, and then they go on a 6-game winning streak coming out of Four Nations. So they're now in this danger zone. So they got this tough game in Boston, who are in the second wild card spot right now, just behind Buffalo. Then they have Vegas coming to town. They got Colorado coming to town. They have to go to Buffalo again for the third time in 2 weeks, basically. Then they're in Mini, a place where they never win, and then they finish the schedule in Winnipeg. And so it's kind of a perilous, last year, what was Marty saying all through this period? All through this period, he's like, we got to sprint through the finish line, Like, don't just look and stop. We got to sprint through. And right now, you look at their last, they've won what? 2 of their last 5, 3 of their last 7, if my math is correct. Yeah. They're not sprinting.
No.
In a big picture point of view, they're not sprinting.
I don't like that expression. I think that is bad juju. He's used it the last 2 seasons, and every time they did not sprint. So
well, he hasn't said it yet this year.
No, and he should not. That's fine. He's good at finding new formulas, new ways of saying things. So that would be a smart opportunity to do so. But it goes back to the fact that they're giving up a lot of goals. Look, they gave up 4 against. Okay, so they gave up
those empty
net
netter
goals.
Yeah.
There's an empty netter there, but generally speaking, I think that they're a bit too porous still. And Marty says when we're at our best, we don't give up much. I'd like to see them defensively at their best a bit more often. They won't be perfect every night, but there's a bit of tightening up to do, because you're right. This schedule is it's a landfill, a minefield. Minefield. Yes.
You're talking about it's a landfill or a minefield. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's it. If you don't want to end up in the landfill, you better avoid the minefield.
Yeah, you better navigate the minefield. So, yeah, it's going to be tough. But one thing I'll say about this team, and this applied even before this season, like you look at that Vegas, Colorado next week, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least if they won both those games, just because those are the types of games this team seems to win. Is when everyone's betting against them, is usually when they perform their best, and they're starting to learn how to handle being like the favorites. I don't think they're doing a great job of that. Like games that they go into where they're expected to win, they generally don't perform as well as the games where, frankly, they're expected to lose. And I don't expect them to lose in Boston, but I expect them to lose to Vegas, and I expect them to lose to Colorado. Like I think that's fair. Those are fair expectations, but part of me also kind of expects them to put that back in my face and take those 2 games. So we'll see. But tomorrow night in Boston's a big one, and we'll be back to talk about it and other things on Monday.
That's right. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a great weekend.